Welcome back to Cheche, the program where opinion counts on Citizen TV. We have two guests today because we're looking for lessons we can learn from the Westgate attack. So retired Major General Charles Manzia, a former director of military intelligence, as well as Michael Mayer, Dean of the New Graduate School of Media and Communications at the Aga Khan University. And before the break, General, we were talking about the coordination. And one of the points that came out about the government's response, for instance, we didn't see any bodies of the terrorists they claim to have killed. That would have been a quick win. You were also talking about a civilian authority needing to call in the KDF. Now, you were quite diplomatic in suggesting that the process of the police responding and the Kenya Defense Forces responding was simultaneous. But what we are hearing a lot, or what we're seeing in the press and various other media, is that there's a lack of coordination, that the police resented the KDF encroaching on their turf.
I think from what I have learned and what I saw, like every other Kenyan, it is true the response was somehow spontaneous. But the issue of identification of who was killed, of who has been arrested, and the military, and it is actually a conventional, it happens in the military world over. I'm not trying to protect them, but I have known for many, many years the diverging information about someone who has lost his life in such an operation. It has a procedure. You don't come out and just say, "This we have got all these people, 1, 2, 3," and show the individuals. First of all, for the military themselves, historically, what I have known for the time I've been in the service is that any casualty in the in the operation is usually not reported publicly until the next of kin has been notified. And this process, you'll be very, very surprised. It doesn't matter where you come from in Kenya, whether you have the Mandera or Lokichogi or wherever you come from.
And this would apply to the terrorists as
well?
It
no, I'm talking about the military, what I know. There will be someone who would have gone home to convey the sad message of the death of anyone within the military. And this takes time. And before then, if there are other casualties who have not been identified, I'm afraid it will take takes quite a while before you can be informed.
But what about the terrorists? Because we were told that the KDF or the security forces killed some terrorists. Why didn't we see their bodies?
They'll talk about numbers, and anything beyond that, once they talk about numbers, this is still an internal security affair as it is, as much as it is, the terrorist attack. The police usually takes over, and they'll be able, the identification process of anyone who is not a member of the military is usually...
No, I'm apprehensive about that explanation. Because why wouldn't they... For me, listening to that information, I just believe there is no terrorist they've killed. Because if they did, the procedures that are employed when you identify serving military personnel, the police and so forth, do not apply to terrorists. And at what point did they decide they were terrorists if they cannot put their pictures out and say, does anybody know this fellow? And if you shoot people and kill them, you can clean them up and get the photo to put out here and you say, these are the guys we are calling terrorists. If anybody disputes, they can come forth.
From my understanding, I think the police would appear to still be going through the forensic identification to be able to know for sure. Because it would have been
so then why would they say there are 8 that they have killed or 10? If they
could be catastrophic to identify a body and say this is a terrorist, and then it turns out to be a noble Kenyan who was caught up in the attack. And I believe this is why the delay is. They would not.
So they're not actually sure, even though we have someone who died in hospital who we're told was a terrorist. We're not quite sure that that was a terrorist. That's what you're saying.
No, what I'm saying is that even as it is, a body will not just be announced as a terrorist body. It could be a very, very innocent Kenyan who died in the process.
Okay, so what is the
they
basis?
shouldn't be telling us
So
that
what
they
is the
have
basis?
killed 8
Exactly.
terrorists.
What is the basis of the number if they don't know anybody yet as a terrorist?
Oh, the numbers will give you an indication because they are compelled to give some information on the progress.
In your fair opinion, General Mwanzia,
Yes.
did we really need the military at Westgate? In your fair opinion, did we need? Because we are talking about the might of the country. We have armored vehicles there. The guy in charge of the military is there. The commissioner of police is there. And here we are losing lives. And we have not got even a single terrorist, dead or alive, because so far we have not. Did we really need the military at Westgate?
I think the military was necessary. It had to be there.
Why?
Because they will not sit back knowing that we have a place like Westgate, which has been taken over by the terrorists. They have a rapid response capability.
What do they do that the police can't do?
I'm talking about General Mwanzia. 15 guys in a mall, which is so expansive, and then you have armored vehicles, you have everybody there, the whole country is there, because of 15 guys, then we end up suffering the way we did suffer, and that now brings the question of the pride of the country.
Well,
Yeah.
I could take a little of the heat off the general here. 15 guys is not the issue, precisely. The issue is how sophisticated and well planned this operation was by the terrorists. They had snipers on the roof. You can't have people walking around in the parking lots, unprotected policemen without armored, without APCs, if you have snipers on the roof. You had terrorists with heavy machine guns. How did they get those in? They certainly didn't bring them in running from that car as they attacked the entrances. These were pre-positioned. They had more ammunition than they could fire, and they fired for 4 days. So this was a very sophisticated operation. They tapped into the closed-circuit TV network. They knew where all the police were. They could watch them. They had an apartment overlooking the mall, it seems, which was a command center. And so the terrorists knew far more about the security forces' movements than the security forces knew about the terrorist positions and their movements. So yes, you needed the military. You needed a paramilitary SWAT team. Personally, I think the Kenyan authorities should have accepted help from the United States and others in terms of their own special forces who are very well trained, but that's another issue. And the latest report, of course, on the issue of whether any terrorists at all were killed in the mall, we shall see, but according to many reports, at least several of these terrorists have already returned safely to Somalia.
Out of your experience, Mike Maya, probably I don't know whether you have had the same experience out there, where there is a terrorist attack, and how is the response if you have had any experience?
How is the security response, or how is the overall response?
In terms of communication.
Well, as I said earlier, I don't think it was very effective at all. I think the public response has raised far more questions than it's answered, and they're very troubling questions, and we've discussed them. There is one exception to this, and that would be President Kenyatta himself. He has been a model of professionalism when it comes to this response. He has been compassionate. He's gone on TV at just the right moments to comfort the nation. He has been honest in describing the authorities' response and the situation as best he can see it at the mall. And he has been very strong. He has shown very little wavering in the face of terrorism. He said today that there will be a full inquiry.
Last night he said.
Last night he said there will be a full inquiry. It's all over the front pages of the newspapers today. And he has also said that there will be no wavering in Kenya's commitments to Somalia, and by implication, the so-called war on terror. That's a very substantive, very direct, very honest statement. It seems to me that as the people in his ministries seek to protect themselves and point fingers at one another to deflect blame, that perhaps that they should take the president himself as their example of how to handle the situation.
I'll now call on the panel to seek your opinions, because we have the Commission of Inquiry announced. We don't know the composition yet, when it will be established. We don't know the terms of reference. Given that this is not Kenya's first encounter with terrorism, I don't believe there was a Commission of Inquiry when we had the first, well, not the first major attack, the 1998 bombing of the U.S. Embassy. What do you think this Commission of Inquiry should focus itself on? Oweru?
I think we need to wait woodwork and see the composition and terms of reference, because as you are aware, Kenya, since independence, we have had over 35 commissions of inquiry. That is including the Work Commission, the TJRC, the Kriegler, and all that. But basically, commissions of inquiry in this country have been a disappointment. First of all, they are used by individuals to make money. You know, they consume a lot of money. Guys sitting there as commissioners, getting allowances. They compile a report that is never actually released. And
although that's changing now.
Although that is changing, but that's what I'm saying. This is the first one after, this will be the first one after the promulgation of the Constitution. So we are waiting to see the composition, how it is going to operate, and probably the people will be involved.
We had the Saitoti Commission inquiry into the helicopter crash.
What have we got from it? That's the question.
The findings were publicized. It was led by Lady Justice Kalpana Rawal.
Yeah, but going through what we have received, I don't know what Makari would say about it, but going through what you have received from the Saitoti, it doesn't make a difference from those other commissions. The usual things that come out, probably this era there, and the story dies there. Right. And by the way, this is another opportunity of forgetting the Saitoti Commission, because now we are dealing with a different one, and Kenyans are very good at forgetting. So this one might be forgotten like Kenya.
Well, the Saitoti, the report of the Saitoti inquiry has just been tabled in Parliament. So the members of Parliament will go through it and hopefully take action, or the recommendations are there on what needed to be done. There are findings about the chopper having been...
all sorts of errors.
Yeah, in a lot of things. So I guess that there is hope. In the case of Westgate, I mean, I think that the only way to get out all the factors and the issues around Westgate is through a commission of inquiry. Because what else? That's the question I ask.
Right, but that's been announced. So the question becomes, what do you think the terms of reference should be?
I think it should be Westgate per se, which should lead, and then the surrounding related security issues afflicting this country. Which
so we're calling in the Northeastern and all these attacks we've been seeing.
I think Westgate should be the entry point for a full inquiry into our security systems and operations. But you know, while Westgate holds the
anchor,
the anchor, the credibility of that commission will depend on the membership. And I think the president is being watched. Everybody is very, very observant about what is going to happen. I have hope that this cannot be like other commissions, because unlike the previous dispensation, under the new constitution, citizens in this country have capacity to actually compel government to take action. And if the president doesn't, he can actually be a recipient of judicial action.
Although, of course, as Michael Meyer was pointing out, I'm sure if you did a poll rating of confidence in President Uhuru Kenyatta, it would be quite high, whereas confidence in his government secretaries would be very low.
Yeah.
So how do we then balance that of a president who seems to be in touch and in tune with his people, but who can't seem to appoint effective lieutenants to manage the nation?
I feel for the president because he has done a lot, but I think it's a lesson for him. I think this should give him an opportunity to understand the people he's working with better, and whatever actions that he will take from now. As Chinua Achebe said, you know, if the mother chicken is attacked, what you do is to chase away the kite, then warn it from roaming in the bush. And I think the idea here is for the president now, first to deal with the hot issue, then come down and say, no, heads must roll. because it seems some people cannot perform. Much as we feel for the new guys, because probably they came from probably even the private sector, they don't really understand the way the government works. But people who are fast learners, they should be able, should be in a position to be able to learn and get to work with the people who have been there, so that you don't seem to be goofing. You don't seem, you should not seem to be like a parrot who is repeating issues that have been raised by others.
Right.
There needs to be a penalty, a public penalty for failure. As an outsider, I've only been in Kenya for 6 weeks. I arrived with the airport burning beneath the wings of the plane.
So we gave you a warm welcome, yes?
So yes, it was a very warm welcome indeed. Now, the airport burns down, the world notices. There's, of course, the ICC issues, which the world has been following very closely. Now comes the Westgate Mall massacre. The world is looking very closely at Kenya right now. And one thing that I would like to say that perhaps Kenyans don't fully appreciate is the degree to which Kenya occupies a global space that even a few years ago it did not. And it's not merely a matter of public perception, these incidents that I've mentioned. Kenya's the jewel in the crown of Africa. It's the most prosperous, fastest growing, coming economy. Investors are coming, businesses are coming. And why are they doing that? Because they see a bright, potentially very prosperous future where a large middle class is emerging, and people who were just poor a decade ago have a chance to become middle class. All of this can be jeopardized by not acts of terrorism per se, but the government's response to these acts of terrorism. So an open and honest, thorough inquiry is absolutely indispensable to Kenya's future. This is not an internal matter. This is a matter of foreign policy. This is a matter of international economic policy. Kenya is not just sitting here as Kenya. Kenya is very much part of the global matrix.
Yeah.
We have to take a break and come back because, of course, we've moved away from lapses into the lessons we can learn from the Westgate siege. You're watching Cheche, the program where opinion counts, live on Citizen TV with experts on the military and communications. As we continue to pick over the terror attacks, send us your opinions on SMS 22422 or Twitter @Cheche_TV.